Jagex just dropped a new update that came into the game in a completely new way. What am I talking about? Well, no, I'm not talking about the Wilderness expansion and rework, although that seems to be going pretty well. I'm talking about Secrets of the North, the quest that dropped at the beginning of this year. Secrets of the North is a unique update because it came into the game in a brand new way. That is, it came in without us really knowing that much about it. The quest was pulled in a mysterious state, leaving us with very little information. The boss was mysterious, the quest was just a master level quest, and the lore, as much as they leaked, was all fake, to be replaced with the real lore later on. One of the reasons I think this approach worked well for the quest in particular is that discovering the lore and discovering what's really going on in a quest like this is part of the fun. You really want to get into these areas without any clue of what's going on. You want to meet the characters and be like, oh, these guys are involved? Oh, this guy's coming? Oh, what's going on here? Oh, the Majorat are happening? Oh, this is a really old chamber. I'm not really sure what's going on here. And then you know you're going to face a boss at some point, so you're hoping that it's not going to sneak up on you and kill you. You know, you're a little apprehensive because you're in this mysterious, potentially dangerous area. And you end up facing the boss at the end, again, which you know nothing about, but which turns out to be an interesting fight with interesting rewards. The Venator bow is the best example. This bow started off as something called the Bloodletter bow, but before that it was the Zarite bow. You know, it's been kind of something that's been talked about for a while in terms of the general mechanics, the bouncing, the strength, the fact that it was a side upgrade that many people wanted for AoE damage, but they weren't sure exactly how it was going to work, what it would look like, the power level, and that's all good because it ended up being that we got to see it ourselves. We got to figure out, oh, hey, how good is this thing? You know, how much should it be worth? And it was dropped in pieces, which we didn't expect. And so the first day someone got a shard, they go, oh my gosh, Venator shard. I think that's part of the bow, but what is it? How does it work? How many do I need? What should this cost? All that's left for us to figure out, which I think is great. It's part of how RuneScape used to be. It's part of how the updates used to be. You know, the first person to get a Godsword shard, like, they probably were like, oh my gosh, this is part of a blade. Oh my gosh, it's part 1. Oh my gosh, you got part 3. Okay, we need part 2. And they put it together, tried it out for the first time, and were like, this thing is crazy. And that's something that we can do now with these new updates. The boss itself is unique. You know, when we're going through this quest, you keep fighting this assassin, and you have the Majorat there, and you think maybe it's going to be something like that, like a wizard or a Majorat or some kind of humanoid guy with various powers, but it turns out not to be that at all. You come into the room and suddenly there's this huge grumbler in there, this slug-looking creature that moves very fast all around the room and has a ton of new mechanics that you've never seen before. But, you know, they're pretty intuitive and you can figure it out, and it's a fun fight, I think, and it's very interesting. But even the whole idea of the boss was something that we didn't know what was going to happen. You know, we didn't know how strong it would be, what kind of drops it would have, you know, the rates. But one important part is that once it was out there for us to discover, they didn't leave us in the dark for too long. You know, from the day of release, they started talking about patches when they were like, you know, changes, patches. Everyone wanted some editing and all sorts of different stuff. So and then of course the drop rates were released, which is something that people have been wanting for a long time, because not only is it like, well, who's going dry, who's getting lucky, what's going on, it helps people plan, like, how much should these items be worth, how much should all of these things, you know, how much should I go for them in my plans? Like, what should my plan be in terms of trying to grind this boss for money, for items, for the pet, which I happen to get. But it was nice that they released that so that people wouldn't have to worry about it. Although it was, again, something that, like, people had already figured out a little bit, which is usually the norm. So one other thing that this approach applies to is the new quests that are coming up for the rest of this year. So if we look at the polls, and the polls are still, like, you know, active, you can still see them. If you look back at the old poll, you can find the quest described as a new mysterious master level quest. And there's some information about the experience and the information about the boss, but that's really it. And similarly to that, we have the poll just released for the 2023 releases. So these were all shown off in the Winter Summit, but then they were pulled right after. So we only know the information that we've been given in there. Desert Treasure 2, A Fallen Empire, the next Grandmaster quest in the Mazrat storyline, is going to be coming, and we don't know that much about it. We just know it's coming to the game. It's going to have bosses. You're going to fight them during the quest, and then you can repeatedly fight them afterward. They'll have some drops, of course, but we don't know. They'll have to come up with drops because the bosses are coming into the game now. There's a prayer book coming into the game. We don't know exactly what prayers are going to happen, but we're going to get a prayer book, and it's going to have to be decent. One thing that I think is really interesting about the prayer book is, like, yes, it's going to be very hard to balance, and because of that, they're probably going to have to reveal a fair amount of the information. But the actual feel and power level and how they work in every single situation, I hope they leave that up to us to figure out, because that's probably one of the funnest part of, like, new combat updates, is when you're, like, still experimenting and you're coming up with new use cases for stuff and new niches and new ways to play the game, basically. And that's definitely possible with an approach like this, since we don't know much about it. Forestry as well is coming as, you know, a very bare bones top level concept. They pulled it and they said, we want to introduce something that is a social woodcutting expansion, and it might have these features, you know, new items, new benefits, collectible things, area benefits, new rewards, like stackable rewards, like woodcutting buffs, like all sorts of things, right? None of those things were actually explicitly part of the poll, so they can always be changed. But the idea of forestry has been approved by the players, and that will be coming. I think that's an interesting thing to talk about specifically, is the way that these things are basically approvals for your content pitch. So if we scroll down to the official account build, this is an example of something that didn't pass. And that's because the community, like, did not approve of the general idea. And while it was quite close, currently they've changed the boundary to 70%, the threshold, I would say. So it was not that far off, but it's pretty important at this early stage to be like, okay, over 30% of the community doesn't even think that this is a good idea whatsoever. And so because of that, it's like, well, we need to take a step back. And in that way, I think you're more likely to be able to address the concerns of those people than if you waited, like, say, a month or two before polling and you continue releasing blogs and revisions and stuff. I feel like those people in that scenario would be even more likely to vote no in the end game, because they're like, listen, Jagex keeps trying to push this garbage. I didn't want it. They kept trying to convince me that I wanted it, but I don't want it. And now I'm definitely not going to vote yes, no matter how many times they change it. I know that's how I was for warding, and I think a lot of other people too. Not that warding was good even in the final iteration, but I think it's one of those things that it's like, for the mods, it's important to be able to get approval on a general idea or disapproval and then move forward from there. Overall, I think this approach is going to be really good for the game. A while ago, I released a video called Why Was This Update So Boring, or something similar like that. And basically the crux of the video was that Jagex had spent too much time communicating bad stuff and not enough time communicating good stuff to the players. A lot of their posts were full of, we're sorry this thing isn't out yet. We're sorry we're having delays. Let's talk about why we're having delays. Let's talk about why we can't give you what you want. But not a lot of time being like, hey, guys, let's get excited for this new thing. Let's announce a new thing. Because there had been a culture of announcing stuff too early, and then the players would be upset that it wasn't out, or upset that they didn't like the concept, and then they'd just go back to apologizing. And so it was better to keep the cards close to the chest for a while, in fear of, the mob mentality, basically. But I think it's better to just get over it, let it out in the early stages. If people don't like it, they're not going to like it. And another month waiting to show it to them isn't necessarily going to change that. But now the communication is more in some ways, in terms of we're going to tell you more about good things that are coming. We're going to tell you, that this is coming soon, and it's going to have this, and it's going to have this, and it's going to have this, and you want it. And we're like, damn, that sounds cool, let's do it. But they're going to tell us less about the unique details that we can fight over. There's no real point to be like, oh, the Venator bow, do you want it to be held vertically or horizontally? Do you want it to be purple or black with purple stripes? They should just make it and then put it into the game, and then people will feel more interested about it because it's new, it's fresh, it hasn't been seen before, versus something that you've seen 100 versions of and you're frankly tired of looking at by the time it comes to the game. Like, say, Masori or Inquisitor or Justiciar. This problem has kind of been going on for a while in terms of over talking about nonsense and not talking enough about getting people hyped for the next update. So that's about it. I think that I'm really a fan of this new update method, and I hope that it continues to make things fresh and exciting for the next year. I'll be uploading more for this year because of that fresh, exciting nature. And yeah, I know it hasn't been a while, but feel free to subscribe for those, like the video, and until next time, peace.